So the claim that I am refuting against today is that animal experimentation for medical research is unreliable. By animal experimentation is when research performed on animals to benefit humans or to find cures for human diseases. To support his claim, my opponent claims that animals are not people. The results of animal experimentation are misleading, and research can be scientifically conducted through methods that are more reliable. The information and sources that my opponent used were valid, so I'll be making counter-arguments against them. My counterclaim against his will be that animal experimentation for medical research is reliable. My first claim will be that, one, animals are not people. The results of animal experimentation can be useful, and research through animal experimentation is at most reliable. My first claim, just as the opponent stated, was that animals are not people. This is sure in fact true. Animals are reasonable replacements for humans in experiments. Humans do have a 98% of their genes with humans share 98% of their genes close to animal relations, just as my opponent stated. Although animals and humans don't have the same exact physiology, testing products on animals first is sufficient enough to tell us whether or not a product is safe enough for a human trial. And this was through an article by this man named Jody in 2011. Animal testing provides sufficient information. In January 2013, Robin Lovell Badge from Animal Research Information wrote an article stating that animal testing has been exceptionally effective at keeping dangerous drugs away from people. Animal testing aids scientists to verify whether or not a certain product is effective or not for humans to try. My opponent's second claim was that the result of animal experiments are misleading, and the results of animal experimentation can be useful. Testing products on animals have led to new discoveries. In 2007, Sam Darling from Animal Research Information wrote, during the last 50 years, the little rodent, which is mice, has enabled us to advance the knowledge and increase our understanding of cancer. New discoveries occur on almost a weekly basis. My opponent claimed that the test resulted from animal experimentation can be irrelevant, but in fact, they can be very useful. According to Gertie Van Hoot, in 2010, he wrote that there are already some life-saving medical breakthroughs that have resulted from animal testing, such as open heart surgery, organ transplants, effective insulin, and many more. My opponent's third claim was that research can be scientifically conducted through methods that are more reliable. Research through animal experimentation is at most reliable. As the opponent stated that today's animal research is retained primarily for legal reasons, this is true. But the reason behind this is for medical purposes. Rachel Hasher stated the reason why. In 1937, a pharmaceutical company in the U.S. created a perforation called sulfonamide using the EDG solvent. EDG is poisonous to humans, but the company's chief pharmacist and chemists were not aware of this. They added a raspberry flavoring to the sulfa drug, which was dissolved in EDG. And the company marketed the product. It led to a mass poisoning causing deaths that were more than 100 people. No animal testing was used during this, and the outcry of the public led to the passing of the 1938 Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, requiring that safety tests of drugs on animals before they can be marketed. For this reason, this is all health-wise for humans and the medicines. And my opponent also claimed that reliable alternatives to animal experimentation exist. This is true. You can do test tubes using cellular collectives and computers. But in fact, animal experimentation is the most accurate method of medical research. Computer models cannot always predict unknown variables that can be discovered with animal testing. Using cellular collectives cannot reveal side effects on molecular levels, such as tumors. And it is the most accurate way to learn the effects of substances on a living body. As Rachel Hager stated, total elimination of animal testing will significantly set back the development of essential medical devices, medicines, and treatment. In conclusion, I hope that you have changed your mind that animal experimentation is in fact a reliable method of medical research for humans. First, I told you how the benefits that have come from working with animals in replacing human beings. Second, the result of animals research have been useful. And finally, I explained how animal experimentation is a better solution to medical research rather than alternatives. Thank you.
All right, Jasmine, I think at the beginning you make a kind of a tactical error by not being willing to confront the sources or the grounds that the advocate is using. You kind of accept the premise of almost every point, but argue that there is a but statement, there's a conditional statement. So, for instance, that you accept that animals are not humans. I think that that's an easy one to accept, but that they are sufficient models in order for us to make inferences. The advocate's claims seem to be that they were insufficient. So we're being asked to make a contrast between your claim and the advocate's claim. So what's the standard by which we're going to make that contrast? The advocate presented examples, and you're presenting examples. You've got some conditional qualified statements. I'm not sure if the advocate provided any qualifications to their claims whatsoever. And you say, it's been the most effective at keeping dangerous drugs away from people. That sounds like a quote. For instance, the advocate may have had some examples of drugs that got by because of animal testing, but the argument that you should be making is that there's a consensus that it's much more likely that they've been screened away from people. So here's where you need to be able to analyze the examples that the advocate uses. And even if the example is a valid example, the question is whether or not they're reasoning from it appropriately. And you just kind of present a counterclaim instead of contrasting the argument that you're making with their particular position. On the second point, I think you start citing evidence a little bit more consistently. And again, you're making counterclaims on these points, and I think that your evidence seems pretty reasonable. But again, we need to be able to contrast that to what the advocate used in advancing their argument. I thought that was a little bit problematic. At the very end, when you talk about reliable alternatives, the advocate said that the alternatives are more reliable. You almost accept that premise. finally, though, you do say that the alternatives have limitations. It is true that there are alternatives, but whether or not they're more reliable is problematic because there are things that the technology can't detect. And I like that argument. You did seem like you had a piece of information that you're using there, but I didn't catch a source citation on that. That was talking about the molecular changes that occur, for the example of tumors when doing the research. I thought that was a good piece of information. You ought to be able to contrast that to the advocate's argument and what evidence that they use. If they've got a conclusionary statement that doesn't give an explanation and yours gives an explanation, that would be a reason why we should accept your information over what the advocate is presenting. All right. Well, thank you very much on that. Let me see. I think we've been pretty effective here. I think we can get in one more here. Jade, how about you? Being our last speaker for the evening.